Welcome. I've had so much fun looking over your responses to our ordering fractions task that you did last week. So I'd like to give you each time to talk through and present your answers and provide reasoning for why you chose the answers that you chose. Now, if it's not your turn to be presenting, you have a very important job. Your job is going to be listening. As you listen, you're going to be thinking about what you're hearing and asking yourself, does this match what I know about fractions? If it does match what you know about fractions, then you're going to have a great answer. You're going to have something excellent to share. If it doesn't, then you might have a great interaction, a great chance to talk and learn from each other. I'm really excited for our time together right now because you're going to talk and you're going to learn from each other. I also want to point out that as we're discussing, if you want to talk to your partner or to your group and you want to respond to someone else's thinking, you can use one of our sentence starters that I'm holding up to the board now. These sentence starters are great ways to agree or disagree with someone else's thinking. You might ask questions and clarify. So as someone is making their claim and supporting their claim with some evidence, you might say, how do you know that? You might ask them, what is your evidence? You might ask them, how does your evidence support your claim? You might say, I agree with, and then name the person or people and say why, or I disagree with them, but make sure you say why. You might also say, I think that the evidence that best supports your claim is, or you might just say, I think the evidence you're presenting supports the claim blank. So these are all ways that you could talk to each other and share your thinking, because you're going to learn so much from each other today. So I'd like you to begin by looking at the shared workspace at at Emily and Carlos's work. Is everyone able to see Emily and Carlos's work?
Yep, we got it.
Excellent. Emily and Carlos, I would love for you to present your ideas and also explain why you chose the answers that you chose.
Sure. So, for our answer, we got 3/10 is less than 3/4, which is less than 9/10.
Oh, wait, that's the answer that you guys got?
Yeah. Did you get something different?
I did. Interesting.
So we actually did two things to get that answer. First, we compared each number to 1/2, and it was easy to see which fraction belonged on each side. And since only one of them was less than 1/2, we knew it had to be the smallest.
Jayla, Will, and Nina, is there any questions you'd like to ask Carlos and Emily about their response, or anything you'd like to add or share to their thinking? And I'm going to hold the sentence starters up if you'd like to use those.
Did you guys draw anything to help you get to that? No. We actually did most of it in our heads. Oh, okay. That's interesting.
Emily, I'm noticing that you and Carlos were comparing some of the fractions to 1/2.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain to us how you knew that 3/10 is less than 1/2?
Sure. So when we're trying to find the halfway point for each of the fractions, we know that, since 3/10 and 9/10 are both tens, they share the same halfway point. And so the halfway point for tens would be 5/10. And we know that 3/10 is less than 5/10, that 9/10 is more than 5/10. And the halfway point for the fourths would be 2/4. And we know that 3/4 is bigger than 2/4. So that's how we know that 3/10 is the smallest, because it's the only one not bigger than the halfway point. And then we have to, use the missing pieces to figure out which one was bigger between 3/4 and 9/10.
Nina, Will, and Jayla, do you have anything you'd like to respond to Emily's reasoning?
I mean, I think using a halfway point is kind of good because, like, when we when we were looking for ours using a number line, we had to make sure the halfway point was lined up.
Thanks, Jayla. We're going to look at Jayla's number line, Jayla and Will's number line in just a minute. So we'll make that connection between your two pieces of work. Carlos and Emily, could you explain your answer? Will your strategy work for any set of fractions?
Well, I think I think you can always compare it to half, like find the halfway point, but from there it might be kind of hard.
Mina, Will, and Jayla, do you want to ask any questions about what Emily means about it might be kind of hard?
I mean, I'm not really sure why you guys saying it's hard. Like, especially with my method. I mean, I don't need to look at the halfway point, but I think it's pretty easy. I mean, all you got to do is just really look at the numbers, right?
I'm not sure we thought about it in that way.
So let's look next at Emily. I'm sorry. Okay. At Will and Jayla's work. Everybody look at Will and Jayla's work on the shared workspace.
Okay, we have it.
Okay. So I'd like you to look at Will and Jayla's number line, the top one that has tenths. Find 5/10. I heard Emily say before that 5/10 is the same as, Jayla, what did she say? 5/10 was the same as
2/4.
5 cents. Oh, it is. I can see on the two number lines that 5/10 and 2/4 are lined right up. They share that same place on the number line.
Yep.
And they
So
were
that's what I
comparing.
meant when it was kind of similar, to our method.
Yeah. I love that. I love how that number line shows us where half is. So, Mina, I want you to tell me, looking at Will and Jayla's number lines, I want you to see 1/10 and 1/4.
1/10 and 1. Yeah, I see that.
All right. So now let's have Will and Jayla explain their strategy and provide some reasoning for why you chose this strategy.
Yeah, sure. So we made two number lines, right? And we only needed two since the 3/10 and 9/10 could fit on the same one. And so we made sure to carefully draw the number lines, line them up with each other, especially the 0, the halfway point, and the 1. And then we broke them up into equal parts.
Jayla, can you talk about the size of the tenths compared to the size of the fourths?
Yeah, sure. So since the tenths has more parts, you got to break it up into smaller, equal parts, as opposed to like the fourths, where it'll be 4 bigger, but still equal parts.
So Mina, Emily, and Carlos, if you've been listening, do you have anything you'd like to respond to Will and Jayla's strategy of drawing number lines?
I think it's a pretty decent strategy. Their talk about like the size of the parts kind of reminds me of what we did like with the looking at the missing pieces.
Tell us more about that with the missing pieces.
Sure. So, well, since we had to find a way to figure out which one was the biggest, well, that was easy since 3/4 has a bigger piece missing than 9/10. So that makes 9/10 the biggest.
Mina, do you have any questions about what you're noticing on Will and Jayla's number lines or Emily and Carlos's thinking?
I mean, I'm looking at the number line, and I guess I can kind of see that like 3/10 comes before, but I'm not really sure how the number line helps.
So Will and Jayla, can you help us understand how that number line helped you?
Sure. So if you look at the number line, like where we drew the two number lines, right? If you look on the left side, you'll see that 3/10 comes first. So 3/10, and then you keep on going, and you run into 3/4. And if you keep going even further, you run into 9/10. So that's how we found our answer. By plotting the points, we can see on the points of each number line which one shows up first and which one shows up last. So if it shows up on the left, it means it's smaller, and if it shows up further to the right, it means it's bigger.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I guess I see why, 3/10 is smaller than 3/4 on the number line, but, I mean, I still don't see why my method couldn't work.
Well, let's look at Mina's method. Everybody look at Mina's method on your shared workspace.
Oh, yeah, we got it.
Mina, can you present your ideas and explain
Sure.
to us why you chose those strategies?
Sure. So, I found that 3/4 is smaller than 3/10, which is smaller than 9/10. And I did that by thinking about the fractions in my head.
Will, Jayla, Emily, or Carlos, would you like to respond or ask clarifying questions to Mina?
Well, what do you mean when you say you thought about the fractions in your head?
Yeah, so I first looked at the numerators, right? And I compared those. And that's how I knew that 9/10 was the biggest, since 9 has the most parts. Then I had to look at the denominators, since the numerator was 3 in the other two. And I saw that 10 is bigger than 4. So that's how I know that 3/4 is the smallest, then 3/10, and then 9/10.
Would anyone else like to respond or ask questions to Mina?
I mean, I'm not really sure we can think about fractions like that, right? Like, I don't think you can just look at the numerator and the denominator separately. I think you have to take the whole fraction into consideration, right?
I don't see why. My method was pretty quick and pretty easy in how we get to my answer. So I think it works.
So Mina is saying that 3/4 is less than 3/10. Let's go back and look at that number line where we have Will and Jayla's.
Okay, looking at it.
So Mina, which one is closer to 0? 3/4 or 3/10?
Which one's closer to 0 on the number line?
Yeah.
3/10.
So which one is smaller? 3/10 or 3/4?
So it's closer to the 0. It's smaller? I guess 3/10.
Will or Jayla, can you help Mina explain that number line and provide your reasoning for why 3/10 is less than 3/4?
Well, yeah. 3/10 is less than 3/4. You're right about that. And if you want to look at it, just look at it from going from left to right. Like the stuff that's on the smaller side would be on the left, and the stuff that's bigger would be closer to the right, closer to the 1. So the first one you see is 3/10. So that means the smallest. Then, like Will explained before, you keep on going, and you look at the bottom number line, you see 3/4. You keep going a little bit more, and you see 9/10. So that's how we got our order.
I like to think of it if I'm running on the trail and I want to run a mile, I start at 0. And the first marker I'm going to see is that 3/10. I'm going to get to that before I get to the other places on that number line. I feel like Jayla's saying if I'm closer to 0, then I haven't gone as far. So that distance on that number line. So I hear a lot of great strategies. I feel like everybody's done a really great job of explaining. Has anybody changed their thinking because of what they've heard from their classmates?
I think I'm still confident in my method and answer.
Yeah, same here.
So let's think about the strategies that we chose. Excellent strategies. Will these strategies work for any set of fractions? So from Will and Jayla, they said, yes, you can make a number line for any fractions you want. Does anyone have any questions or would you like to respond? Do you agree or disagree with their claim that you can make a number line for any fractions so that strategy will always work for any set of fractions you compare?
I guess I would disagree because, like, what if the fractions are super big? Like, what if they were in like the thousands? It's definitely possible, but I just need a little more time. Yeah, but it might be kind of hard. Like, once you have to keep going and going and going and drawing it perfectly, it might take a long time. It'd just be kind of difficult to make a number line. I guess it's something to think about.
Let's go back and look at Carlos and Emily's work. Carlos and Emily said that their strategy would not always work thinking about half, because they said that some fractions are still hard to compare after that. I heard a really great strategy before using that number line, thinking about the size of the pieces. 3/4 or 1/4 is a bigger piece than 1/10. I wonder if we could combine those two strategies. I feel like you guys all have this wonderful thinking.
What do you mean by combine?
So if I'm Emily and Carlos and I'm thinking about half, and then I don't know what to do after that, maybe I could use the number line strategy after that. That's
Well,
really
maybe.
cool.
But like we said before, like if you let's say you had super big fractions like in the thousands, it might be kind of hard to still use the number line, especially with all the drawing.
That's true. So if I'm thinking about thousands, is that a big fraction or a small fraction of a whole? Think about that for a minute. Thousands.
I think that's pretty big, right?
So if I have one whole, let's pretend I have a whole pizza. We were talking about pizza with our lunch choices. And I split it into thousands. How many pieces of pizza am I going to have?
1,000?
1,000 pieces. Are those pieces going to be big or small?
Probably super tiny, right?
Super tiny, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just thinking about the size of the pieces might be really helpful. So if I have to think about thousands, maybe I don't have to draw them, but I can just think they're going to be really small. I love it. So Mina says that her strategy will work for any set of fractions. Would anybody like to respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really agree with their answer, and I don't really understand how our method works to get the answer she did not do. Like looking at the number line, it doesn't match up.
So Jayla, would you have a suggestion for Mina?
I mean, I guess I'd say to use the number line.
Does anybody else have another suggestion for Mina? I love it because there's more than one strategy. So if we know just looking at the numbers isn't going to help us compare fractions, what else could we do?
Oh, by the way, teacher, we have 2 minutes.
Hey.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. So we know that we can't just look at the numbers to compare fractions. We know the number line is one strategy. We know another strategy could be thinking about half. Are there any other strategies we've talked about today that you could also use to think about comparing fractions?
I know you're mentioning something about a pizza.
You know what, Emily? I'm going to pause you there. I want you to turn and talk to each other and see if you could think about another strategy you could use. Talk with each other.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I don't know. I'm not sure anything about that. You can definitely get to that point if you think about the answer. I think it's good.
Thank you for coming back together. Mina, what did you and Will talk about?
Well, like what Emily mentioned before, like you talked about a pizza. We talked about maybe like, I don't know, maybe like comparing the pizzas or something.
What do you mean comparing the pizzas? Will, can you elaborate on that for your group?
Kind of like if you drew the pizza and you split it into equal pieces, kind of like how we had to split the pieces on the number line. Maybe you could compare the two pizzas.
Comparing the pieces. Oh, Emily, what did your group talk about?
Yeah, I think the food example is pretty useful.
Carlos, can you? Well, thank you so much for your kind conversation with each other today. I heard you listening to each other. I heard you responding to each other's work and agreeing or disagreeing in really respectful ways. Do you think that you learned from each other today?
A little bit, yeah, sure.
Well, thank you so